The Confederate garrison flag that's captured at Fort Anderson may have cost Abraham Lincoln his life. I've got it pictured in the book. Yeah, we tell the story. There's the Confederate garrison flag that flew over the fort during the battle. And when the Confederates evacuated the fort in the pre-dawn hours of February 19th, they evacuated so hurriedly that they did not spike their cannons or destroy their stocks of ammunition and gunpowder. They just got out of Dodge. So if you can imagine them just packing their wagons and gathering up their firearms and their haversacks or knapsacks worth of stuff and just getting out of the fort before they were captured. They took that garrison flag and they rolled it up and apparently threw it on a buckboard wagon. And as the wagon pulled out of the fort before dawn, the flag fell off the back, unbeknownst to the driver.
Yeah.
So the Union troops, some of which were still just south of the fort, could hear these sounds throughout the early morning hours, and they figured the Confederates were abandoning the fort. And so at sunrise, they locked their bayonets onto the end of their rifle muskets, fired a volley, charged the fort, stormed over the walls of the fort in time to capture 40 or 50 of the Confederate rear guard that were protecting the main army that was then retreating towards Wilmington. And an unidentified soldier in the 140th Indiana Infantry found that flag lying on the ground. He later claimed that it was captured, but one of his colleagues in the 112th Illinois Regiment said it wasn't captured, it was found, it was on the ground. Either way, this guy gave it to his commanding officer, Colonel Thomas Brady. Exactly 1 month later, on March 17th, that flag was presented to Governor Oliver Morton at an elaborate flag ceremony in downtown Washington, D.C. at the National Hotel. Governor Morton had come from Indiana to Washington to see about Union prisoners of war from Indiana that were then being released, many of them through Wilmington. In fact, that's how we think the flag got from Wilmington to Washington, because the 140th Indiana was still involved in military operations at Bentonville and Raleigh. So how did that flag get from Fort Anderson to Wilmington to Washington? And we think some of the officers from Indiana who were released in the prisoner of war exchange, and I'm writing an article right now about them, were given the flag to take north back home to Indiana. And when they got to Washington, they learned that Governor Morton was in Washington to see about them. And they said, well, we've got a trophy of war that was captured at a fort called Fort Anderson near Wilmington, and we'd like to present it to you, and we'd like to do it officially on March the 17th. And Governor Morton accepted the Fort Anderson flag as a trophy of war. There were 2,000 people at this flag ceremony. And President Lincoln made a surprise guest appearance. No one was expecting the president to be there, and he shows up, and Governor Morton literally says a few words, and then he turns it over to the president. And the president spoke a few words to the crowd, no prepared remarks, but he talked about the coming of the end of the war, and specifically talked about the role of African Americans in the new republic. And in that crowd of 2,000 people was a young actor by the name of John Wilkes Booth. And he was hearing Lincoln talk about African Americans in the new republic, and he just got angrier and angrier. John Wilkes Booth earlier that day had a kidnap plot set for Lincoln, who was supposed to go from the White House to the Campbell General Hospital to visit Union soldiers who were recovering from the war. He was going to go out there to watch a play, visit the soldiers.
The soldiers' home is kind of like the Camp David. He'd go there on the weekend.
That's right.
To get out of Washington.
It's about 2 miles away from the White House. But
it was that was out in the country.
It was out in the country. And Booth somehow found out, maybe when he went to Ford's Theater, but he found out that Lincoln was scheduled to go out there. So he got his ringleaders, or his cohorts together, some of those guys who ended up being executed for their role in Lincoln's assassination. And he rode out to Florida Avenue, and they set a trap to kidnap Lincoln. But Lincoln wasn't feeling well that day, and decided instead to go to the Fort Anderson flag ceremony, where he could see his good friend Oliver Morton, shake his hand, thanks to the Republican for his solid support for the Lincoln administration during the war effort. So Lincoln changes his plans and goes downtown. Booth, who was waiting for the president's carriage to come along, and it doesn't, gets on horseback, rides out to the hospital only to learn from a friend that, the president's not coming. He went downtown to some flag ceremony at the National Hotel. Booth aborts the mission, gets on horseback, rides into town to the place that he happened to be staying, the National Hotel. And as he rides up and gets off his horse, there's the president speaking over that flag. And from that point on, he will change his plans for Lincoln's ultimate fate. Now, I'm not arguing that that flag cost Lincoln his life, but I think you could make the argument that what happened in our backyard played a role in the Lincoln assassination.